Hey, I'm Gene Goldman. Here's a look at the week ahead for the week of April 10th. This week is going to be an important week for the direction of financial markets. First of all, first quarter earnings season begins this week with banks. Banks are releasing later this week. Second of all, March economic data. We'll get a lot more readings on the March economy, and with signs the economy is slowing pretty quickly, we'll get more evidence of this or not. And third of all, lots of Fed speakers. With all this said, though, I'm not going to just focus on the most important data point, but instead I'm going to focus on the most important day this week. That's Wednesday, because Wednesday, we get two data points. We get the CPI, Consumer Price Index, which is a monthly measure of consumer inflation. And then we get the FOMC meeting minutes from the last Fed meeting back on March 21st and March 22nd. So let's start with CPI. Keep in mind with the Fed, when the Fed senses a recession, usually they cut interest rates. This helps stimulate the economy. Today, it's a very different story. You look at this chart here, global inflation is still pretty elevated, and domestically, inflation is above the Fed's 2% target. So even if the economy is slowing pretty quickly, I'm not sure if the Fed can cut rates if inflation remains stubborn, especially services inflation right here. If Wednesday CPI comes in above expectations, even with the economy slowing, the Fed may have to keep raising rates. So if you look at the consensus expects headline CPI to fall slightly from 6% to 5.2% year over year. And then core inflation, where you take out food and energy, a slight rise from 5.5% to 5.6%. Also, Wednesday, we get the FOMC meeting minutes. And as a reminder, and I know we've talked about these before, but these meeting minutes come out 3 weeks after the last Fed meeting, and they go over what's been said behind closed doors. So if you go back to the last Fed meeting back in March, the Fed raised rates 1/4%, but this was in the midst of a banking crisis. So we'll get from the meeting minutes, the Fed talking as usual about the economy, but more importantly, with the banking crisis going on, how will this impact the Fed's future rate decisions? Keep in mind, it's estimated that the banking crisis equaled about 0.5% of Fed rate hikes. And because the banking crisis theoretically slows the economy down. And why does it slow the economy down? Well, when you have a crisis, this creates more regulations. And on top of this, you have a decline in bank deposits. Both of these together tightens lending standards, as you see here, which equals maybe a credit crunch, which equals maybe a potential recession. A lot going on here. Anyways, the overall takeaway is that we see economic data slowing fast, and there is some stress in the banking system. Usually during these times, or when the Fed has a whiff of a recession, the Fed cuts rates. It's difficult right now because we have elevated inflation. If signs that the inflation is slowing down, this will help the Fed to pause or maybe pivot. Again, a lot going on this week. Thanks for listening. For more information, please follow us on Twitter at CeteraIM. See you next week, and thank you.